Yeah, done with my Oreo.
Okay, good.
Do we really know what happened?
The brother did.
The brother, that's what I thought too.
I mean, that seems like kind of obvious.
Hey, do you want to talk about death?
Yeah. I mean,
Murdery thingy.
Ready?
Good. Welcome to Mystery Murdery Thing.
I can tell you started because you put on your podcasting voice.
Right. I slipped it on. Feels good.
Like a nightgown.
Right.
Yeah.
I was thinking it's more like a suit that's like just a little too flashy, where it doesn't look quite good. It's like you're trying to look good, but it doesn't really look good.
You show up to the wedding late.
Right.
You look too flashy.
You're wearing like a pale blue like tuxedo, and it's like
You're wearing those checkered Vans because you couldn't find your dress shoes.
right, exactly. Your hair's all tousled. Anyway. Oh, you just hit the mic.
My bad.
Sorry, y'all. Oh, yeah, I think I noticed that at the beginning of the last episode, too.
Well,
I think it was me, though.
Things are happening here in the podcasting tent.
It's true. Welcome to Mystery
Fort.
Murdery Thingy.
Yes, welcome to Mystery Murdery Thingy.
I'm Mario.
I'm Chloe.
We're going to talk about mysteries.
And murderies.
And thingies.
Ooh.
And all sorts of thingies. But I'm doing another assassination, because that's
I'm
like half of the ones that I do.
I'm
Are
excited.
you excited?
I am in excitement.
Good. I am a bolt of excitement.
I am frustration.
I don't know what you're doing, but is it from Inside Out or something?
No, it's I think it's a Vine. I am
okay.
in confusion.
I see. Oh, I know that one. Yeah. Isn't that like an old Indian woman?
Yeah.
Nice.
America, explain.
Should I go first?
Sure.
Okay. Great. Because I usually like to go first. Here, you can hold it.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
We're taking turns.
It's fun to take turns. Okay.
Let's get together. Yeah.
So I'm doing another assassination.
Okay,
like I
I'm
said.
in. I'm excited.
And so last week I did, or not last week, but 2 weeks ago I did an assassination in New York City. This time I'm doing one on literally the other side of the world.
Nice.
So this is going to be the assassination of Chea Vichea, who was like a workers' advocate and like a union leader in Cambodia.
Cambodia. Okay.
Yeah, Cambodia. So, so I'll kind of start it out by talking about what happened on the morning of January 22nd, 2004. That morning started out, pretty much like most others for Vichea, except that it was Chinese New Year, so that was kind of special, right? So that morning he was, according to his widow, Chea Kimney, quote, plucking his mustache and studying the Khmer English dictionary, close quote.
Oh, is he you?
Right, I know, right? And he spoke pretty good English from the documentary I watched. And what Kimney says is that he planned on staying home that day with their young child, their daughter, who was like maybe 3 or 4 at the time. And he received a mysterious phone call. And she doesn't know who he talked to or what they talked about. But right after he received the call, he said, "I'm going to head out." And he didn't say where he was going. So he asked if their child wanted to go with him, and she said no, she wanted to stay home with her mom. So he left and went to kind of one of his usual spots, which was a newspaper stand, like a little, just on the street newspaper stand, where he was reading the morning edition of the Cambodia Daily along this kind of narrow sidewalk near a really busy street in the Chamkarmon district of Phnom Penh, the capital of Cambodia. And this is how the newspaper stand owner, Varsothi, described what happened next to Cambodia Daily. Quote, "He sat and read the Cambodia Daily newspaper opposite to me. Chea Vichea usually came to read the newspapers, sometimes in the morning and sometimes in the evening. When I saw the attacker coming in, I did not pay any attention to him. Then he shot Chea Vichea." Just bam. It just happened super quick.
In public?
It's super public. But kind of. So 2 men on a Honda motorcycle, right, had stopped abruptly right there on the street next to Vichea. They weren't covering their faces or anything, by the way. The one who was on the back of the motorcycle casually just got off of it, walked over next to Vichea and shot him 3 times at point-blank range, within arm's length, according to Sothi. He was hit once in the left arm, once in the heart, and once in the head. And then the attackers speeded off. It took like 2 seconds, and they were gone. And Vichea was laying there dying. And, it's obviously extremely tragic, right? But it's not something that was unexpected at this time in this context in like Cambodia, especially for a man like Vichea, who was very famous in Cambodia as, a opponent of the government and, of the sort of the bosses and the powerful people in Cambodia who were not giving the fair shake, right, in his mind to the workers that he represented and who he was as well. He himself was a garment worker as well. And he had no small number of really powerful enemies, and he knew this. Everyone knew this. And everyone also knew that he was prone to going to this particular newsstand in the mornings or the evenings.
Routine.
Yeah, so Vichea, like so many other, fearless advocates that we've talked about before, but there's like too many to even like start naming them. But he's just like one of these people, right, who knew that they were in harm's way, acknowledged this, right, but kept on fighting. Like, literally in those terms. Like I was telling you when I watched the documentary, he was literally like, I know I'm in danger, but I can't stop. If I stop, who's going to fight for these people? They'll have nobody. So I can't. I think he said something like, for me to stop would be like dying. So he knew that he would probably be killed someday, but to him, not fighting for the workers and the people he cared about was literally like dying. It was just as important as physically dying to him.
Wow.
So it's interesting. That's kind of I think that's kind of how he put it. So it's an interesting kind of philosophy. I mean, it's very extreme, right? But he was very extreme when it came to like his advocacy, right?
Yeah.
He was had very few limits in that respect. So just kind of to lay that groundwork, right? So anyway, he had also been more cognizant of this danger, right? Of that he was in, like, to his life more recently before this. And again, this is January 22nd, 2004. And the previous July, there had been elections in Cambodia, which were very fraught. And I don't want to get like too much into the history or like politics of Cambodia, but we have to talk about it a little bit at some point.
Yes, give us
so
the
I guess we may as well just talk about it now. So yeah, go ahead.
Just like what he was fighting for and why and
Sure.
how it all came to be.
Definitely. Okay. So you can't talk about the history of Cambodia without talking about the Khmer Rouge immediately.
Oh,
like
of
it's
course.
the most important thing that's happened. I mean, one of the most important events in world history in the past 50 years that no one ever talks about. I mean, it's one of the most horrific genocides that's ever been committed in the world, on the same level of intensity and horrificness as the Holocaust, as the Rwandan genocide that we just had the 25th anniversary of. It is truly, I believe, and I'm sorry if I get this incorrect, but I believe the figure is that 25% of the population of the country was killed in this 15-year period or whatever it was. So this is where they're coming out of, right? And this was in the 70s to 80s to 90s, I believe, somewhere in that nature. So it was not that long ago. And this, when my story happened, was in the early 2000s. So by this point, a former commander in the Khmer Rouge is the leader of the country, Hun Sen. There's also a king who nominally is the leader of the country, but has really no true power, in my understanding. And again, I'm not like a Cambodia expert, but this is what I sort of gleaned from my research. The other two contenders in the July 2003 elections were a gentleman I can't remember who represented the Royalist Party, and then another party which was the one that Chea Vichea was supporting, which was the Sam Rainsy party. And Sam Rainsy was an opposition, parliamentarian or politician who was kind of the it seems like, right, in a sort of facile understanding, the true, voice of the people, right, in this context. And Chea Vichea was very much behind him. And what Sam Rainsy said in the documentary was interesting. He said, and I think this is really true, sometimes they go after the secondary targets because they know that going after the head person, right, killing Sam Rainsy of the Sam Rainsy party would cause too much bullshit for the government, right, for it to even be worth it. But you killed Chea Vichea, it's huge, right? I mean, was huge world news at the time. He was an internationally known figure for being an opposition figure in Cambodia, but they could basically get away with it, as we'll kind of see. So that's a little bit of the background. But leading up to this event itself, Vichea had received numerous specific death threats. And one very chilling one was a text message that read, quote, "A dog, I will kill you, 260703, close quote. And just to understand, in a lot of the world, they say the day first, and then the month, and then the year.
Yes.
So that's what that is, July 26th, 2003, which, of course, he was not killed on that day. But that may be in part because he was in hiding at that time.
Oh.
But as was his nature, Vichea was not going to remain in hiding forever, and he was not going to leave the country. What he said was, why should I leave the country? What's the point of that? Then how could I do my advocacy, right?
Right. He won't be doing his work, and then he
Exactly.
might as well be dead.
Exactly. And yeah, his work was more important. So he was not fazed, really, by these threats. And he came out of hiding. And his brother, Chea Moni, said that, quote, he wouldn't listen to anybody, close quote. So he was just insistent that this is like what he was gonna do, one way or the other. So he led this, free union, right? And there at that time were free unions and government-controlled unions. So it's a complicated political situation in Cambodia. The whole history of workers' rights and collective action in Cambodia is very fraught because, on the one hand, they had, by this time, by the early 2000s, nominally instituted a number of reforms. And nominally, people had the right to free assembly, to the creation of free unions, to protest. But on the ground, things weren't really that way at all. For anyone, really. And the government basically did not hold to their word or to the rule of law in any of these instances where they had signed on to treaties or passed laws or even in the Constitution of Cambodia itself.
So in the law books, we have freedom of this, that, and the other thing, but the government wasn't really...
Exactly.
It wasn't really like that. Kind of like when, after Brown versus Education, it didn't really... happen.
Yeah, because people act with impunity.
Right.
At some point, if the person on the ground doesn't agree with what the law says, they're just not going to do it, And especially if the leader of the country doesn't agree with it either. At least in the case of Brown versus Board of Education, there was a president who was willing to send the National Guard to enforce the law. If the president hadn't been willing to do that, then the segregationist South never would have done it. Mm-hmm. Now, of course, we could get into a whole thing about how segregation in America has not ended, nor has it gotten better, but that's a whole different topic.
Look at Chicago.
Yeah, literally. Look at maps of... Anyway, well, we don't need to get into that whole other thing. So, Vichea was one of these central people, right, fighting for the authorities to match the promises that they had made on paper in those various, laws, treaties, constitution. Sadly, though, the government of Hun Sen does not seem to have met those responsibilities in many, many instances. And that very much includes the investigation into Vichea's killing. Mm. So, although the police responded quite quickly and with overwhelming force right after the slaying, right? When what was her name? I forget now. The the shop owner called the ambulance right away, right? And the police came, but the crime scene was not cordoned off. So many journalists and other members of this huge crowd that was pressing in, tainted any evidence that they could have gotten from the crime scene.
I feel like this is a classic
I
thing.
know, right?
It's always the crime scene that's
time.
never quarantined with assassinations. They do this investigation, and the number one thing that never happens is that they don't secure the crime scene.
And sometimes it's incompetence, and sometimes, as probably more so here, it's intentional incompetence, right? And the police also moved his body after about 5 minutes without really doing any sort of, forensic examination on site, in situ, one might say. Sothi was the name of the
Shopkeeper?
Yeah. So, according to her, the investigators, led by Deputy Police Chief Heng Pov, produced a fake composite drawing, which she says bore no resemblance to the actual shooter, who, of course, she saw. She also says that the investigators told the press that she had given a description of the shooter, which was absolutely not true. And in fact, she called the Deputy Police Chief, Heng Pov, to tell him, why did you tell the press that? That's not true. I never told you that. And he had to correct the record later and was like, don't write about this. If you write about the shopkeeper, you're going to hurt Chea Vichea's, the investigation. So he didn't really say it, but he was sort of walking it back, without having to say it. So it's kind of interesting. But she seemed like a really strong person. Like, she was like, no, like, I'm not going to let you just lie about what I said. That's my. It seemed like a matter of pride to her. So which I totally agree with. I appreciated that. So anyway, she there was a lot of pressure on the police at this point, right, to find the killer. We see this a lot as well, right, all over the world, especially in America, where it's like, okay, when are you going to find the killer? It's been a day. It's been 2 days. It's been a week. Like, and it's not necessarily the worst thing, because obviously, yes, the police should be held to account to run a proper investigation, but it can also create some bad incentives, right?
Unnecessary haste.
Yeah, exactly. And in a system like this, where the rule of law doesn't really apply, it's really, really bad, right? Because the police did find 2 men to arrest after 48 hours. Their names are Born Somnang and Sok Samun. And this is, of course, despite the fact that Born Somnang had an alibi, placing him at least 40 miles away from Phnom Penh in the sort of a little more rural town where his girlfriend lives. And he was placed there by, like, between a dozen and 20 witnesses, many of whom were willing to come forward and did so in open court. And while Somnang had these witnesses, willing to come forward to testify and verify to his alibi, Sok Samun was not so lucky. He had an alibi that he was at a party in Phnom Penh to celebrate Chinese New Year, because, again, it was Chinese New Year. And the witnesses, though, were unwilling to come forward because of the danger. Yeah. Some of the witnesses who came forward on behalf of Born Somnang had to leave the country because they were arrested. The police were harassing them. They were in danger just because they were a witness to an alibi.
Wow.
Which is pretty insane. It's pretty fucked up, right?
I didn't expect that.
Yeah, but it's the system there just seems like so deeply corrupted, that it's very insecure. If the police have a reason to make trouble for you, then it just gets very, very hairy very, very quickly. So there was no real evidence, right, linking them to the crimes. But yet they were convicted. They were convicted, and their conviction was upheld on numerous appeals. Any exculpatory witnesses or evidence were discouraged, or worse. They were held in pretrial detention for more than a year, despite the fact that there's a nominal restriction of 6 months for pretrial detention in the Cambodian constitution, I believe. all of this was widely seen both domestically and internationally as a total debacle, as a complete show trial, and a real disservice to Chea Vichea and, you know, any sense of justice that one would have for him.
Show trial meaning like we're just going to do this just to please you all. We already know what we want to do, right? And
this is a common phenomenon, actually. In many contexts. I was just hearing them talk about this sort of phenomenon in Iran, I believe. In the case of Jason Rezaian, the Washington Post reporter who was brought up on trumped-up charges in Iran and held for over 500 days. They said he was like a CIA spy, whereas there was no evidence to that effect. But there was a trial, right? A judge came in, everybody sat down, it was all orderly, people had papers in front of them, but it was all meaningless. It's a show. It's just a fucking show. But it's so that you can go and say, no, but we had a trial. You know, we're not a lawless country like you're saying. We had a trial. They went through the process. They had an appeal. They were allowed to speak, you know.
Wow.
But it's just not real. So, a little bit more of history and context. Apparently, during the Khmer Rouge genocide that we were talking about earlier, all judges were killed. And there were only reportedly 10 persons left in the country with legal training. So as a consequence of this, judges that, you know, are there now, presumably, and certainly at this time in the early 2000s, were largely extremely incompetent. And reportedly, all of them, without exception, were beholden to the executive branch. Or other corrupted, you know, intents. But legally, like formally, they were beholden to the executive branch, just because that's kind of how it's set up in Cambodia, apparently. So, unfortunately, Samsung, or Born Sam Nong, rather, and Sam Sung-un, Saksamun, sorry, had no real chance, right, for a fair trial. With one exception, and only one exception. And this was the first investigating judge, Hang Turith, from the Phnom Penh Municipal Court. He ordered, after hearing all the evidence and everything, right, that the case be dismissed due to lack of evidence from the police, because they didn't have none, really. And, however, this ruling was overturned. And that judge was reassigned to a very unfavorable assignment immediately afterwards.
This is all scarily well organized and efficient, and that's freaky.
It is, yeah, definitely.
It's very hairy. There's lots of secret, cloudy shit going on.
And in the documentary, they show how, like, during this same exact time, you know, they show the American ambassador and the British ambassador or something having, like, you know, this fancy dinner with Hun Sen when he finally got the prime ministership after an extended, you know, battle after the July 2003 elections. And it's like, you know, the U.S. is like, oh, you know, things are getting better. You know, that's like, it's not how it used to be. You know, when they were killing millions of people, well, okay, but it's still not good, right? And it's still not worthy of praise when shit like this happens. You know, it's disappointing, you know. And one has to imagine that if it were the Clinton or Obama administrations and not the Bush administration that were, you know, around at that time, maybe it would have been different. But I don't know. I don't know. Maybe not. Probably not. It probably would have been the fucking same, honestly. But anyway, they were sentenced to 20 years in jail, but continually pleaded their innocence. And if you watch the documentary about this, Who Killed Chea Vichea, that documentary is hard to get through.
Oh, wow.
And especially the parts where they come in, you know, where they're allowed to talk to the press, or they come into the court and they're just screaming, you know, like, this is injustice. They're torturing me. You know, they made me confess. They're yelling this, you know, just continuously. Like, I didn't do this. I'm being tortured. You know, it's just crazy. This is like the Khmer Rouge. Like, they say that at one point. Like, this is the same thing that's happening right now.
Do we know where they found these guys?
Yeah, I can get into that a little bit if you want me to.
Yeah,
It's essentially they were in the wrong place at the wrong time. The way that this kind of works, and I was going to kind of get into this right now, actually, because it's essentially the suspects in this case, right? It's the police, right? I mean, there's not really any other credible suspects other than that the police did this. And the way that this kind of works, reportedly in this at this time in the Cambodian police, was that there's like the guy who runs the police, the 4-star general of the police, who's like the right hand man to Hun Sen, the leader of the country, and it kind of goes down from there, right? And at the level of an investigation like this or a hit job like this,
Yeah.
a figure like Hang Pov, who's the deputy police chief in Phnom Penh at that time, I believe, has essentially his overt ranks, right? And then he has his covert ranks, his secret police that work underneath him.
What?
Whom he pays directly, right? From probably corruption that he's getting his money from.
That's a thing?
And it's all off the books. And apparently this in Cambodia was very much a thing. All of the commanders and higher ranking people had secret police working under them.
So do you think we'll ever get any names of who
No.
did this?
I mean, not unless there were maybe some big shift in the government and then, they found records and decided to release them. But it's I think, very, very unlikely.
Wow, we'll never know.
We'll probably never really know. So that the shop owner, the sole eyewitness to the crime, of course, says also that a plainclothes policeman was standing near the scene of the crime as it was happening, although there weren't really any other people around, and was heard to say on a cell phone that, quote, "this work is done," close quote. So, I mean, it doesn't get quite, it doesn't really get more open and shut than that,
That is some shady,
in a sense, right?
shady
Allegedly.
work.
So, according to a former UN advisor, there were these kind of secret cells of police, hitmen, essentially. And one of these cells was led by Hang Pov. And Hang Pov, presumably under the direction of Hun Sen, on down, was given the order to take Vichea out because he was an undesirable person, because he was making a lot of trouble, right, for the government of Hun Sen, etc., and his friends. So then he would have farmed that out to the actual killers, who then would have taken out, basically done the hit. And in the documentary, there's an anonymous person who purports to be, one of these former police members who did this kind of thing. And he says, essentially this is how it would work. You knew where they were. You would go, get it done. If everything went well, you just kill the target and you're out. If things go south, you just kill everybody.
What?
That's what he said.
Oh, fuck. I
This
wasn't
is even
expecting that
okay.
at all.
This is going to be even more fucked up. He said they usually would then take the bodies and feed them to alligators.
What?
And when they asked him, so how many runs, to the alligator pit did you make? And he's like, many. And the documentarian, he's like, more than 10. And the guy's like, please.
Oh my god! Oh, I just got chills!
I know,
Oh my
it's
God.
crazy. So yeah, Vichea's killing, unfortunately, was only one of the most prominent of a number of political assassinations in Cambodia around this time. It was just really, really bad. I'm not sure how things are there now, honestly. I don't really know too much about it, but yeah, not that great. And like you said, we'll probably never really know, but he left a big hole in his society. And at the end of the documentary, they talked to some different workers, and one of the workers said it's like losing a mother. And I thought that was maybe the best way of summing it all up. He was like a mother. He was like a mother to thousands, hundreds of thousands of people, for whom he stood up for their rights and his rights. And therefore he could not remain, I guess, in the eyes of certain powerful people in Cambodia. It's unfortunate. And because of that same system, we will never know who really did it, probably. It remains a mystery.
Wow.
So
That was wild.
I know, right? So let me do my sources. Van Ruin and Kevin Doyle at Cambodia Daily, an article on Voice of America, Andrew Nachemson, maybe, and Jan Siniat at Al Jazeera English, Wikipedia, the Who Killed Chea Vichea documentary, directed by Bradley Cox, an Amnesty International report titled The Killing of Trade Unionist Chea Vichea, James Walsh at Al Jazeera English, and an article on the Cambodian League for the Promotion and Defense of Human Rights page. So that's my thing.
That was good.
Yeah. Okay, now you get to go.
Now I get to go. Okay. Okay, it is my turn. Okay. So, ting tang, walla walla bang bang. So you said you know a bit about this. So a little bit. So go ahead and chime in when you would like, or don't chime in because I might get to it.
Okay.
I'm gonna talk about the 1962.
Tell me about it. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm going to talk about the 1962 Alcatraz prison escape.
I am excited.
Okay. So this is actually... So I knew this was intricate, but I didn't know how absolutely fucking wild this was. These people were geniuses, MacGyvers, really, really smart and patient and calculating and... Okay, we'll just get into it. So let's talk about Alcatraz itself. So it is if you don't know, it is a maximum security prison on Alcatraz Island, also known as The Rock. It is 1.25 miles off the coast of San Francisco. So you can stand on the waterfront and look out and see it.
So I was just going to say, if you've ever seen the movie The Rock, you know what we're talking about.
All right.
That's where it's set.
It opened.
Sean Connery.
I think it was a fort in the Civil War.
I believe so. Yeah.
And then it opened as a prison August 11th, 1934. So on Wikipedia it said the capacity was 312, but it actually held around 1,500 of the baddest of the bad, all right? These people were troublemakers. The inmates here were repeat offenders and always causing problems at other federal prisons. So if you were too much for, like, some other place, they were like, all right, get your ass out of here, you're going to Alcatraz. The prison operators and people in general believed that it was escape proof because of its location. You know, it's on this rocky island, and it's on the rough, frigid, deep San Francisco waters. The Bureau of Prisons staff and their families, I actually didn't know this, like, live on the island as well. And so this place housed a lot of famous criminals. Al Capone, Chicago gangster, killed a lot of people, drank a lot of alcohol, did a lot of trafficking, made a lot of money.
He's come up in the pod a couple of times.
Al Capone, yeah, we did the Valentine's Day massacre.
Exactly.
And that was under him.
And then when I did one, he was, like, vaguely connected to it, too.
Yo, this guy is everywhere.
Yeah.
Also, George Machine Gun Kelly was at Alcatraz. He is also a Prohibition-era gangster, but instead of Chicago, he was in Memphis, Tennessee. And he kidnapped oil tycoon Charles Urschel, and he actually collected a $200,000 ransom for it.
Wow.
Yeah. So he's over there in Alcatraz. We have Whitey, I think it's
Whitey Bulger.
Yes, Bulger. He is the boss of the Irish-American Winter Hill Gang in the 70s and the 80s. And he was an FBI informant, but he always denied it. And he was eventually jailed on 19 counts of murder. So this guy was a cold-blooded killer.
Yeah, he was in hiding in California for like 20 years or something.
Right.
Yeah.
Alvin Creepy Karpus. He served the most time out of all the inmates at Alcatraz, 26 years. He was the leader of the Barker Karpus gang in the 1930s. His partner, Arthur R. Doc Barker, was also in the gang and also spending time at Alcatraz. He was one of the 4 criminals to be named public enemy number 1 by the FBI, and he was the only one to be taken alive. All the other ones were killed. So, Robert Franklin Stroud, the Birdman of Alcatraz. This guy's weird. Before being in Alcatraz, he was at Leavenworth Penitentiary in Kansas, where he, like, sold birds, and he became an ornithologist, and he was in, like, solitary confinement, like, collected like 300 canaries or something like that. He, like, found the cure to some bird disease. Dude, like, yeah, he, like, got shit done. Because when I read, I was like, ornithologist, what? And I was like, oh, he really was, like, an ornithologist. Legit, yeah. But he was not a great dude, convicted of murder. But he died in prison in 1963. So Alcatraz has a great history of attempted escapes. 36 prisoners made 14 escape attempts during its 29-year history. And overall, Alcatraz wasn't open that long. Eventually, it got really hard to maintain. It was more expensive than what it was worth. So they just took everybody out and put them in different places. I'm going to touch on the Battle of Alcatraz. This was a failed, violent escape attempt. It lasted for a few days between May 2nd and May 4th in 1946. So it was planned by inmate and bank robber Bernard Coy, along with 3 other inmates. So this actually has a Clint Eastwood. No, it's not this that has the Clint Eastwood movie. It's the actual escape itself that has the Clint Eastwood movie. My bad. But this was a different prison escape, and they were not successful. So Bernard Coy, 3 other inmates, Marvin Hubbard, Joseph Kretzer, and Clarence Carnes. 2 other inmates, Sam Shockley and Mirren Thompson, joined the escapees after the attempt had begun. So they just kind of hopped ship. So Coy was a cell house orderly, and he's, looking around, he saw flaws in the security. He noticed that the corrections officers in the gun gallery had set routines, so inmates could then predict when the main cell block and the gallery would be unobserved. So Coy, he's like, he looks at the gun gallery had like bars, but no extra, nothing else. It was just bars. He was like, I could fit through that. So he starves himself. He loses 20 pounds and he grabs some pliers. So guard Bill Miller opened the gate to conspirator Marvin Hubbard's cell. And then Coy and Hubbard grabbed the guard, beat him unconscious. Coy takes his keys. He sets 2 more inmates, Joseph Kretzer and Clarence Carnes, free, and then he uses purloined pipes and pliers to spread the cage bars just wide enough for him to push through. They lock this Bill Miller, they lock him in the cell. Bam. Get the fuck in there. He then sneaks up on the next guard, takes his necktie, strangles him into unconsciousness. This is like some real-life action movie bullshit.
Yeah.
Coy then raids the gun gallery for weapons and ammo. So now him and 5 other people are armed and free. Their plan is to take the guards hostage. This is so stupid. Their plan is to take the guards hostage and then negotiate their way onto a boat to San Francisco. Yeah. Not a great.
To like Guadalajara or something.
Yeah, not a great plan.
No. But
it doesn't work. So the guard was smart. Coy tried every key, but none of them worked. None of them opened the cell block door. Turns out the guard Miller had hidden the crucial key in the toilet of the cell where he was being held. So he took it. At 2:07 p.m., the prison siren sounds, which only goes off in like serious emergency. Apparently it's pretty loud because the article I was reading talked about how people across the way in San Francisco like gathered along the waterfront. They're like, oh shit, something's going down. So they could like watch what was going on. At this point, Coy had opened fire on the guards that had gathered outside the cell block. One of the conspirators, Joseph Kretzer, panics and he's like, okay, yo, we gotta kill the hostages so they can't testify against us. With his stolen revolver, he shoots into the cell containing the captive guards and he fatally wounds Bill Miller. Police, military, and prison guards at this point, they begin an assault from the outside, attacking the cell block with rifle-launched grenades. For hours this goes on. Night falls. And then on the morning of May 4th, the smoke settles, and the guards storm the cell block. Inside, they find 3 dead conspirators, Kretzer, Coy, and Hubbard, and 3 survivors who surrendered. In the end, 5 people died, 3 escapees, and 2 guards. 2 of the conspirators who surrendered were sentenced to death, and the other, Clarence Carnes, was actually the youngest prisoner at Alcatraz, so he was given 99 years to life instead of death. So I couldn't leave that out. It was very exciting.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Now let's talk about the escape itself. The escape was made by inmates Frank Morris, John Anglin, and Clarence Anglin. And if you want to see a really over-exaggerated, not accurate movie about this escape, go check out the Clint Eastwood movie. They also had a 4th accomplice, Alan West, who ended up being left behind, but I'll get into that in a sec. So let's talk about the inmates a little bit. Frank Lee Morris grew up in Washington, D.C. He spent most of his childhood in and out of foster homes. His parents abandoned him. He was convicted of his first crime at age 13, spent most of his early teen years in jail, serving lunch to prisoners. Actually all of these inmates, Frank, John, and Clarence, they all escaped from previous prisons. So he escaped from Louisiana State Penitentiary, where he was serving 10 years for bank robbery, and he wasn't captured until a year later.
Wow.
And then he was sent to Alcatraz on a number of charges this time: armed robbery, narcotics, breaking and entering, burglary. He was actually caught in burglary, so that's why he was caught. So he was extremely intelligent, had an IQ of 133, and in the top 2% of intelligence amongst those at Alcatraz. So the brothers, John and Clarence Anglin, they were born into a family of 13 children in Donaldsonville, Georgia. So they were inseparable as kids. They were skilled swimmers, and often swam in Lake Michigan during the winter for shits and giggles. They worked as
Sounds terrible.
Worked as farmers and laborers. Clarence was caught breaking into a service station at just 14 years old. The two started robbing banks together in the 1950s and were given 15 to 20-year sentences that they served at many different prisons, from Florida State Prison, Leavenworth Federal Penitentiary, and then Atlanta Penitentiary. They were sent to Alcatraz after numerous failed escape attempts from the Atlanta Penitentiary. So these weren't amateurs, not amateurs at all. Nobody at Alcatraz was an amateur for that matter. The group had actually begun laying plans the previous December. When one of them, he's like, there's some saw blades here. So they started gathering tools. They used spoons, the saw blades, and they actually there's a lot of really clever homemade stuff. They made a homemade drill made from the motor of a broken vacuum cleaner to loosen and widen the air vents in each of their cells at the back. So the entire section of the wall could be removed. So once they had that done, they hid. So when guards would come by, they hid the holes with whatever they could, a suitcase, piece of cardboard, whatever. They covered the noise of their work by Frank Morris's accordion playing, which I thought was clever.
That's pretty good.
Behind this wall was a common unguarded utility corridor. They made their way down this corridor and climbed to the roof of their cell block inside the building, where they set up a secret base, a little workshop. So there they took turns keeping watch for guards in the evening before the last count, and so this is December on to June. That's where they started to gather what they needed to escape. Some of the stuff was donated to them. Some of the stuff was stolen, including more than 50 raincoats that they stole or gathered. Those were turned into makeshift life preservers and also a 6x14-foot rubber raft. The seams were stitched together and vulcanized by the hot steam pipes in the prison. So they also built wooden paddles and converted a musical instrument into a tool to inflate the raft. So this is some real life shit.
Like you're saying MacGyver type shit.
Yeah. At the same time, they were looking for a way out of the building. So the ceiling was a good 30 feet high, but they used everything they had to their advantage. They used a network of pipes, and they climbed up those, eventually pried open the ventilator at the top of the shaft, and they kept that in place temporarily by fashioning like a fake bolt out of soap. So, on the night of June 11th, 1962, they crawled through their vents and into the corridor. They gathered their gear. They climbed up and out through the ventilation shaft and got to the roof. Alan West, however, he had used cement to shore up the crumbling concrete around his vent opening, and it had hardened, so it narrowed the hole and fixed the grill in place. So by the time he was able to remove it and then re-widen the hole, the others had left.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so he climbed back down and went to sleep. For real. So the three, they are hauling their gear with them. They descended 50 feet to the ground by sliding down another pipe, a kitchen vent pipe. Then they climbed two 12-foot barbed wire perimeter fences. There was actually a blind spot at the northeast shoreline where the guards and the watchtowers couldn't see. It was near the power plant, so that's where they inflated their rafts. At some time after 10 p.m., this is what the investigators estimate, they boarded the raft, they launched it, and departed toward their objective, Angel Island, 2 miles to the north. On the morning of June 12th, the inmates were found missing after an early morning bed check, so they're long gone. In their beds were cleverly built dummy heads made from a mixture of soap, toothpaste, concrete dust, and toilet paper. And they topped it with real human hair that they got from the prison barbershop, and they used flesh-colored paint from the mechanic shop. So it was these dummy heads and clothes and towels stuffed under the blankets made it look like that they were sleeping, and those actually fooled the night guards. There's multiple checks throughout the whole, a whole 24 hours, and those are the ones that fooled the night guards. So that's why they weren't caught till the morning. So they sounded the alarm, and a manhunt began immediately. So within 2 days, a packet of letters sealed in rubber and related to the men was recovered. Later, some paddle-like pieces of wood and bits of rubber inner tube were also found in the water. A homemade life vest was also discovered, washed up on the beach. But, they had all these extensive searches, and they didn't find any other items. An extensive air, sea, and land search involving multiple military and law enforcement agencies. They did that over the next 10 days. Investigators were, they were pretty sure that the men had drowned, but they never found any bodies. The FBI did, however, say that it was theoretically possible that they could have made it to Angel Island, but the frigid waters and the choppy waves made it almost impossible. The FBI closed the case in 1979, and none of the inmates were ever heard from again.
Pretty crazy.
Or were they? In 2013, a handwritten letter was sent to the San Francisco Police Department's Richmond station. The letter claimed to be from escapee John Anglin. Quote, "My name is John Anglin. I escaped from Alcatraz in June 1962. Yes, we all made it that night, but barely." The letter went on to explain that Frank Morris had lived into 2005 and that Clarence Anglin had died of natural causes in 2008. There was a reason that allegedly this guy was writing. The letter said that he was 83 years old, in bad shape, and he wanted to cut a deal with the police. Quote, "I have cancer. If you announce on TV that I will be promised to first go to jail for no more than a year and get medical attention, I will write back to you to let you know exactly where I am. This is no joke. After an investigation, they actually had they kept it for about 5 years, and they didn't really release to the public until January of 2018. So they sent it to the lab, examined it for fingerprints, DNA, analyzed the handwriting, but the results were inconclusive. Yeah, it could have been a prank. It could have been real.
I don't know. It doesn't seem real.
We'll never know. But the thing is that no one, at least this is what I read, that no one else has ever claimed to be them. This is the first time that something like that has happened. So that's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
But the fates of the 3 inmates from Alcatraz still remains a mystery.
A mystery.
Yay.
Yay, mystery. And that's what we're all about.
Oh my god. What a crazy. I want to watch the movie though.
Oh yeah. What were your sources?
Oh, sources. A lot of Wikipedia Alcatraz penitentiary page, Wikipedia June 1962 Alcatraz prison escape page, independent UK article by Adam Lusher, History.com article by Natasha Frost. And I got a lot from the official FBI government page on the Alcatraz escape. So they had a lot of good investigation stuff on there. And Alan West, the guy who didn't make it, was the one who was like, all right, I'll tell you everything. Here's what we did. Here's the plan. Yeah. So lots of patience, 6-7 months of planning, and they did it. Maybe. We'll never know.
Could be. Good story. Yeah. Thanks for
you.
listening, you guys.
Thanks for listening.
Sorry, this one's coming out later Wednesday.
But it's Wednesday.
But it is still Wednesday, so technically we're still on
I'm graduating in 2 weeks.
Right. We got shit to do.
I have a lot to do.
But yeah, check us out on our Instagram and my Twitter.
Instagram, Twitter. Please follow us on Twitter.
MarioTex30 and @murderythingy, I believe, is our handle.
I never heard one.
I know, right?
You'll find it.
You can visit our Patreon page. And yeah, just all the stuff. So.
Is it time for weird shit
Oh,
in the news?
I thought I don't have any.
I do.
Oh, I thought you didn't have any either. Okay, you go.
Well, I found it last minute.
Oh, sorry. Weird shit in the news.
Weird shit in the news. So this is from jpost.com, the Jerusalem Post, an article by Zachary Kaiser. Quote, opium-addicted parrots terrorize Indian poppy farmers.
Oh, yeah. You showed me this earlier.
Amazing. So this was in Madhya Pradesh region of India. Interesting, because I just talked about the scams over there. So there really were parrots terrorizing poppy farmers in recent months. So it's this serious problem. They've been experiencing monumental losses to their product. So also isolated rainfall caused a damper on this year's product, but the parrots are exponentially adding to the farmers' distress, ruining the farmers' products in the process. So apparently they tried making loud sounds and even using firecrackers to scare them, but nothing helped. So one poppy flower produces 20 to 25 grams of opium each. However, the farmers are suffering from the parrots feeding on the plants up to 40 times a day, with some even flying away with the poppy pods.
Wow.
So they're getting high and coming back for more.
Mm-hmm.
And it's devastating. We, quote, we have tried every trick possible to keep the birds at bay, but these addicts keep coming back, even at the risk of their life, the farmer concluded.
That'd be crazy.
I don't know, birds could get high.
Yeah, no, I think animals of all stripes, not only humans, do gain some kind of, altered mental state, I mean, we know elephants do this with alcohol and naturally fermented, berries and stuff. So, yeah. Thanks for chiming in, Mozzie.
Thanks, Mozzie.
I don't know if you guys could hear
I
that.
don't know.
Okay.
He's pretty loud.
Okay, is that... Are we done?
Are we done? I'm
I
done.
think so. Yeah, I don't have any weird shit. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Okay.
I think the opium addicted parrots did it for us.
Yeah, that was a good one.